And with that, it is time to introduce our next presenter on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Martyn Crew, Director of Industry Solutions at Gigamon. Martyn, are you there?
I'm indeed. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you for being on. Take it away.
You are very welcome. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for the introduction, and hello to everybody who's joining us on this Modernizing and Securing State, Local, and Education IT webinar. My name, as we've said, and as you can see, is Martyn Crew. I'm responsible for what we call Industry Solutions at Gigamon, and that focuses very largely on government, public sector, both at the federal, the state, the local, and higher education level. And what I'm going to do today is take about 20 minutes to go through a very brief overview of our activity in these areas. So my agenda is to give you a little bit of an overview about who is Gigamon, for those of you not familiar with us. Then I'm going to talk about the issues that we're seeing in modernizing, securing state and local, and then focus a little bit more on the higher education. At the end of that, we'll talk again briefly about how Gigamon can help you get control of security, help you modernize the infrastructure, and then take Q&A. So here we go. A little bit about us. So for those of you not familiar with Gigamon, we're one of the leaders in what's called the network visibility and analytics market. So we provide full visibility into all the transactions crossing your network, whether it's in the data center, whether that data center is physical or virtualized, or in the cloud. We give you information, or we give you analytics onto everything on the network. We have been around for several years and have established a customer base of about 4,000 customers. They tend to be large organizations, so we have 83% of the Fortune 100. We have all 10 of the top 10 government agencies, and we also have many state, local, and higher education organizations. And the higher education organizations we have are actually on a global basis, not just in North America. A couple of things on this slide I want to call out. One is our customer satisfaction rating. This is something that we work extremely hard at, making sure our customers get great support, and that's reflected in that number. And then the other thing to call out is the number of patents we have. So this is obviously an area where there's been massive technological change over the last several years, and staying up with exactly what's happening in networking and security technology is very important. So it's a big challenge for organizations of all sizes, but we've risen to the challenge and have a total of 75 patents, and that's something that's growing all the time. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about us. I'll return to a bit more about the product at the end of this presentation, but now I want to focus on the government and education market. So you've all heard the cliche over the last few weeks since the COVID-19 outbreak that this has been one of the great accelerants for digital transformation. So regardless really of whatever the industry you're in, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a major effect, but I think nowhere has that been more significant than in state, local, and higher education. So whether you agree with this statement that the next 5 years of digital transformation is going to happen in the next 5 months or not, it really isn't the point. The point is we all, I think, accept that this is fundamentally a game changer in the way that governments and higher education operate. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in more detail right now. So what we've seen from our state and local government customers is obviously a massive disruption. This is not an event that anybody had really planned for. I mean, there's obviously discussion of how much planning had gone into this, but at the state and local level, I think the answer is there was just not enough. Services are strained to breaking point. I mean, those of you who are involved in the delivery of services to citizens are very aware of this, and that citizen data is more at risk than ever before. The number of attacks on state, local, and higher education has risen significantly over the last several weeks as threat actors realize that organizations are very distracted, that as people have moved to work from home, there's a lot more vulnerabilities on the network. So that citizen data that we're all so focused on protecting is really at significant risk. Then obviously there's the budget uncertainties. You know, clearly we don't want to get political in this presentation, but this has become a bit of a football as to exactly how state and local are going to be funded moving forward. All kinds of ideas out there. Wherever you stand on the political spectrum, I think everybody agrees that at the core, state and local government is going to be in a funding crisis for the foreseeable future. Obviously, many local entities were already in something of a crisis. So this is something that's going to be exacerbated by the present situation and going to result in uncertainty for many, many years to come. What we're seeing IT organizations do in response to that, and really where we're helping, is in 4 areas, I would say. So the first is in terms of increasing security. So this is a very obvious initial response to the situation that we find ourselves in and the attacks that we find ourselves under. The first thing you really have to do is to ensure that you are able to secure both the citizen data and also government data across all of the environments that you're working in. And clearly, those environments have now changed. All state and local institutions have many generations of systems internally, and those systems have many different security models. With the move to things like work from home, stretching this even further, the number of vulnerabilities has increased very significantly. So one of the primary things that we've been engaged with our customers is looking at how they increase the security of all the data, regardless of where it is. The second thing that we've seen is a real focus on improving the security and the speed of online service delivery. Obviously, with the ability to offer face-to-face services diminished, that burden has to be taken up by online systems. And those systems can't just be spun up overnight. You know, in many cases, those systems did exist, but to scale them out maybe from what was a pilot basis to something that's supporting millions, tens of millions of people is a very significant task. So the how of you do that is something that we've been very involved with state and local government in, particularly in areas like, you know, how do we scale the back end quickly? How do we move this to the cloud? How do we use containerized technology to scale very rapidly using systems like Amazon as a back end? And then how do you maintain security during that process? You know, one of the big issues as you move systems maybe from on-premise to the cloud or from one cloud to another or across multi-clouds is how do you actually retain visibility into all the traffic across those environments? And obviously, maintaining visibility is the key to enabling security. So this is one of the big areas we've been very focused on. That kind of goes to the next bullet as well, which is maintaining visibility during cloud migration. Those of you who look at the analyst reports on what's happening now will be very aware that one of the big things people are looking to do is to assess which of their systems they can move to the cloud. And in terms of moving to the cloud, which route they want to choose. Do they want to buy SaaS-based solutions that are off the shelf that they can quickly implement and quickly scale, where you're using an infrastructure like Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams to enable very widespread video conferencing, for example? Or do you want to take existing custom systems that you've developed over the years and adapt them to run on cloud platforms like Amazon, like Azure, Google Cloud, whatever, to scale that way? Whichever way you go, you've got visibility issues because you don't have visibility into SaaS-based applications typically, and you can have visibility into cloud platforms, but it requires some thought and some engineering. And particularly as you migrate from one to the other, you've got to be very sure you don't lose visibility in that process. And then the final thing that we're working very hard with organizations on is this last point, which is optimizing budget and cost recovery And there's a number of ways Gigamon can help organizations do that. For example, a lot of state and local governments are realizing that they need to upgrade their network infrastructures pretty significantly, and that can be a very costly task. One of the ways that we can help with that is we can actually extend the life of the existing tools on the network, because the Gigamon products is architected to support a number of different speeds. So we can work with tools that are designed to work at 1 gigabit, 10 gigabit, 40 gigabits per second, and we can help those migrate to 100 gigabit networks by essentially throttling back the traffic to those particular tools so they don't become overwhelmed by what's happening. So the existing tools that people are using on the network is something that we can often help relife as people go through that process, and by doing that, help them save significant money. So those are some of the things that we've been seeing in state and local, and some of the ways that we've been working with customers to address some of the issues that they've got. I'd now like to look a little bit at higher education. And if state and local has been seriously disrupted, that's even more true for the higher education market. So really what we're seeing in higher education is disruption and challenge on an unprecedented scale. Organizations obviously had to close down physically. They had to relocate training from classroom to virtual environments in a matter of weeks, and the infrastructure to do that was something that most higher education institutions just simply did not have. Clearly, a lot of commercial higher ed organizations had this in place. In fact, it's been the backbone of their business model for a couple of years now. But for state and local, most people had not anticipated the need to make this move anywhere near as quickly as they had done. And resolving that is a very complex issue. So I was listening to Admiral James Stavridis the other day, who I'm sure most of you are aware that as well as being an admiral, he's also the dean of the Fletcher School at Tufts. And he was describing the discussions that he's seen there and on other campuses about what do we do, when do students come back, how do they come back, do we migrate completely to an online model? Do we use a mixed model? He described the complexities around that as being very much like a Rubik's Cube, that there were endless permutations, and that as soon as you try to lock one of those in, several other things changed in the process. So it's a very, very complex issue to address. Obviously, technology is at the core of how you are going to address it. Because one of the things that I think is very clear is that all colleges are going to be moving to a mixed model of campus and distance learning. Exactly how that works out, when that works out, you know, it's a state-by-state, institution-by-institution decision right now. Some of the schools, clearly California leading among them, have said, no, nothing for 2020. We're going to try and get students back on campus 2021. Other people are being much more aggressive, and they're looking at some pretty interesting models, like only have freshmen and seniors on campus or move to sort of shift systems. Whatever happens, technology is going to be at the heart of this, and is already at the heart of it, because clearly organizations have had to provide some level of distance learning capability already. So the ability to respond to that is a clearly major issue facing all of us. The data that these organizations hold is also more at risk than ever before. So we've seen a very significant step up of attacks on universities of all kinds, not just those universities that have a research capability. It's been well documented in the last couple of weeks that there are state actors who are going after universities, research institutions of all kinds involved in COVID-19 research. But beyond that, just the move to learning, distance learning, the move to work from home has massively increased the attack surface of all schools of all kinds, and they are under very sophisticated attack as we speak. Finally, the budget shortfall situation is something that's causing major consternation in this market and isn't going to be fixed anytime soon. Whether it's private institutions, whether it's institutions that relied heavily on sports programs for funding, whether it's grants and aids of any kind, it's just a very, very uncertain picture how this is going to play out in the next little while. So for those people in the audience in higher education, you do not need me to tell you that it's a very, very complex situation. What we're seeing right now with our customers in the higher education space, and these comments apply on a global basis, not just within North America, but we're seeing organizations really struggling to get visibility into the tools that they're using to support the distance learning model. I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through the presentation. But for those organizations that haven't previously had large-scale implementations of tools like Zoom and WebEx, understanding the implications of those on the network has been a process of trial and error. And trying to get visibility into that and get ahead of any problems has been a significant one. The second thing is network upgrade costs are a really big issue. I mentioned this a little while ago in terms of state and local, but we've seen one of the clear concerns of universities being that you can play with the bandwidth to try and fix things like video conferencing to support many of the distance learning applications, the curriculums of online curriculum apps that are on the network. But just tinkering with that by trying to optimize that is not a long-term solution. The real solution is that you need to upgrade the network and often upgrade it very significantly. We can help with that. As I mentioned, we can do a lot in terms of extending the life of existing security and network tools. We can also ease that transition by ensuring people have complete visibility through the process as they upgrade their network speed. So there's a lot we can do in those areas. There's a lot we already are doing with institutions as they move to, at a minimum, 40 gigabit networks, and in most cases try and move to 100 gigabit networks. Third area of concern is obviously security, and this has been one huge area we've had a lot of activity in over the last few weeks. So as students migrate to studying from home and using distance learning technologies, typically they're using their own laptops, which they probably do at school as well, their own mobiles, again, probably do at school, but they're introducing the variable of the home networks. So as many of you are very aware, most home networks work on the basis that when the network's put in, you buy So as people have moved to study from home, you've got, this matrix of laptop, mobile, and home network vulnerabilities, all of which need to be addressed, and you need to get visibility into all of those things. Fourth thing we've seen people very focused on is really a fallout of that, and that's looking at the performance of all the security tools on the network. Again, many security tools are geared to accept data coming in at a certain rate. With a massive increase in the amount of data that's now flowing over the networks, many of those tools are just overwhelmed, and they are just not able to keep up with all the data. So there's very inconsistent application of the security that they're supposed to provide on the data that they're supposed to be securing. So one of the things we can do is we can use techniques like filtering, slicing, and also deduplication to make sure that tools, for a start, aren't looking at duplicate packets of data, which is a very common issue. Our studies often show that 53% plus of the data packets on a network are actually duplicated. So just off that one statistic, it's clear that many tools are working twice as hard as they actually need to. The other techniques we can use are things like filtering. So with filtering, we can actually look at traffic and decide what's safe, what's low risk, what's higher risk, and how that low risk and higher risk traffic needs to be processed. We'll talk a bit about that in a second when we start to talk about some specific use cases. To talk about 3 specific use cases that we're seeing in schools. Okay, so this is applicable to both schools and higher ed, but obviously schools may be more than state and local government right now. And that's the optimization of network visibility and performance, particularly around things like video conferencing apps. So with the move to using tools to support work from home and distance learning, network bandwidth is at an even greater premium than it's been before. So one of the big problems is getting visibility into all the data on the network with the increase in data. And there's a particular problem that we're seeing right now, which is around encrypted traffic. So clearly, most organizations are moving to use encryption as one of their primary security capabilities. Encryption, in most cases, is a really good solution, a really good way to do that. But it does bring complications and risks. One of the risks is that without adequate visibility into encrypted traffic, it could possibly be masking things like malware or other ransomware type things as part of its payload. So you need visibility into the traffic. You also, when you've got visibility into the traffic, need to understand the data that's being carried, need to understand whether sensitive data that maybe can't be shared with all applications, with all tools, and maybe needs to be masked. So maybe you've got information there around student IDs, maybe you've got information around citizen social security numbers, driving license numbers, whatever, and that needs to be masked. So that's one part of what we can do. So as well as ensuring overall visibility, we can ensure so granularity is applied to that so that only the information people should be able to view is shared with the tools, the applications that need to consume it. Second thing we can do is in terms of visualizing the information on the network. So we're able to use a product we have called Application Intelligence to do 3 key things. The first is to visualize all of the applications on the network. So we visualize the apps in terms of which is generating most traffic, and we do sort of a highest traffic analysis, and we can display that information in terms of a number of very easily digestible charts on a dashboard. So pie charts, charts that show spikes in traffic, and then also a table that shows you what the applications are that are running on the network that are generating most traffic and how they can be, how that traffic can be filtered. So we go from application intelligence visibility to application filtering. So we can look at all the applications that are generating traffic. We can say, all right, this traffic is safe traffic. This is traffic that we've looked at in the past, that we've said is safe. It does not need to go through all our security procedures. So for example, streaming traffic. So if you look at a traffic stream and you determine it's containing Netflix data, there really isn't a need to look at every packet of data in that stream. So we can categorize traffic as being no risk, low risk, high risk, with a much higher degree of granularity, but conceptually we can classify the data in that way. And then for each application or each group of applications, we can say, okay, everything that we've classified as being a social media application needs to go through this particular security route. And then we can use techniques we've got like flow mapping to automate that process. So again, using filtering, we can filter out traffic from tools that doesn't need to be inspected, reduce the traffic to those tools, and therefore increase their efficiency so that the traffic they do need to look at, they're much more accurate in their assessment of it. The final thing we can do is we can use a product called Application Metadata Intelligence to actually look at the interaction of the application with the network. So for example, with video conferencing apps, we can look at things like what's the frame rate that's being delivered? Has the quality just dropped from high definition to standard definition? And then based on seeing signals like that, we can actually send alerts to people and drill into the issue and try and isolate the issue and respond to it and remediate the problem much more quickly. Okay, so those are a few ideas that we're working with customers to implement around network visibility and performance. Second area I want to discuss is a sort of a specific problem that can be very time consuming for a lot of organizations, and that's working with TLS certificates. So, as I mentioned, there's been a massive increase in encrypted traffic on the network. There's also been a trend towards reducing the validity dates of the certificates on the network. So you've got much more traffic and you've got much shorter validity period. So tracking what's expired, what's non-trusted, what's self-signed, etc., takes more and more time and becomes highly disruptive, particularly in an environment when people are already fighting fires on multiple fronts. So things that we can do that help organizations that work with certificates are, we can automatically identify certificates that are expired or are approaching their expiry date, or that are non-trusted. So rather than waiting for a problem to occur, we can get in front of it and identify issues where, or we can identify potential issues, alert people to those, and they can handle those problems so that there aren't issues with a certificate expiring and a service suddenly going offline. We can also do things like identify self-signed certificates. So those of you involved with this know that this is a problem, and that self-signed certificates are often an indicator of deeper security issues. So a couple of key things that we can do here to accelerate the process by automatically identifying expiries that are about to occur, automatically identifying certificates from non-trusted sources, and automatically identifying self-signed certificates, which could indicate bigger problems coming. Final thing I want to talk about in terms of specific use cases goes back to the security issue. So one of the things that we've all seen is that more and more threats, the attack surface has significantly increased in state, local, and higher ed. BOB at home is causing major problems. So how do you actually counteract that? Well, there's a couple of things. One is you need to make sure that your existing security is fully optimized. But secondly, you need to look at gaps in that security and ask yourself, are there actually better ways we could do this? So one of the products that Gigamon has is called Threat Insight. It's a SaaS-based product, so it can be stood up very, very quickly. And it uses a combination of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and also human intelligence through an applied threat research team to work with customers to look at all of the potential threats hitting the network, assess the threats, prioritize the threats, and then those threats that are seen to be high risk, use artificial intelligence combined with human intelligence to address those. So again, particularly for organizations that are involved in research, this is an area where we've seen a lot of activity recently, a lot of interest in the Threat Insight product. I'd now like to just do 2 more slides and then we're through. So the first slide just generally talks about how we can help you. It talks about our architecture at a very, very high level. So clearly we're all in this environment where there are more devices, more applications than ever before on the network. You've got legacy applications that aren't going away and that need to be modernized. You've got devices on the network, whether they're medical devices, metered devices, sensor-based devices generating tons and tons of data. You've got to move to a cloud, which maybe means that you're looking at using containers and microservices, and those often have non-traditional security models that aren't easily managed. And then finally, the point of consumption for almost all data these days is the mobile device. And those have many particular characteristics, both at the performance level, the screen handling level, and at the level of security that you need to be aware of. All those devices and applications are working on a wider range of infrastructure than ever before. So obviously the traditional model is the physical data center. Increasingly, data centers are moving to a virtual model, and also almost all organizations are using the cloud for either SaaS apps or to deploy larger at-scale apps themselves. So most organizations are now working with a fairly complex hybrid infrastructure. To manage that infrastructure, they have a very wide variety of performance and security tools. The average Gigamon customer, for example, has 20 different tools for managing the network. And those organizations that manage maybe multiple data centers, they'll have multiple instances of those tools. So you just have massive complexity, both in terms of the applications, the platforms, and the tools that manage them. What we do is we put an abstraction layer between those two. So we essentially provide a management platform for everything that is on the network, but it's physically abstracted from the connectivity, the data cable connectivity. So you can manage your network at a higher level using a drag and drop interface that makes it much, much easier to make changes on the network, to identify whether bottlenecks, whether are problems, and then to dive in and solve those problems. Specific things we do. So we talk about three things when we talk about Gigamon. One is run fast. And run fast doesn't just mean speed. It means the ability to adapt the network to new challenges, new needs, which we're all seeing right now in the government and higher ed market. It means the ability to scale and to deliver online services more quickly. So to be able to take applications that are maybe running on premises, work with DevOps teams to migrate those to the cloud, maintain visibility through that full life cycle, and then when they're in the cloud, maintain full visibility as they scale to whatever level they need to. Second thing we talk about is stay secure. So secure obviously has a number of aspects to it, but a couple I want to highlight here are securing the data. So clearly this is a critical issue for people in this market, and we make sure that the data as it travels across the network stays secure. As I mentioned, we use techniques like masking to ensure that as data traverses the network, it isn't subject to vulnerability of people being able to hack into a data stream and see the information in full view. Secondly, we're able to enhance existing security procedures by making the tools more efficient, and we can reinforce them by adding SaaS-based capabilities like our Threat Insight tool and also centralized decryption for SSL and TLS capabilities. And then finally, the optimization capability. So this is around not just optimizing tools, but optimizing teams. Because if you can help the tool operate better, you can help the team operate better. And we understand how tight resources are for most IT teams in state, local, and higher ed right now. So anything we can do in that area is a big help. And we can also, as I mentioned a couple of times, help optimize against budget by extending the life of tools so that when you do upgrade the network, for example, you don't have to buy a complete new tool set. So those are a few of the key things that we're seeing within the markets that we're discussing today, with some of the things that we're seeing our customers do, and a couple of the ways that we're able to help out. So what I'm going to do now is to say thank you very much for your attention. And I am going to open up the question panel and see if we've got any questions.
Yeah, great presentation, Martyn.
Thank you.
We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Gigamon solution? So I think we just have time for a couple quick questions. Let's see, first question I wanted to ask you came in, and they're saying, what can Gigamon do to help us with compliance?
Okay, so Gigamon is not a compliance solution. We do not store data at all. So we can work in conjunction with compliance systems. So essentially our role in ensuring compliance is ensuring that while the data is traversing the network, that it is compliance with all regulatory standards. So we do that. So I'm not specifically aware of what compliance regulations there are in state and local, but for example, we're SOX compliant, we're HIPAA compliant. So again, ensuring compliance of data while it is traversing the network is our role in the compliance equation.
Okay. Okay. Good point there. And then another question they're asking: can Gigamon give us visibility to traffic in the public cloud?
In the public cloud, so yes is the answer. We can provide the full capability we have with on-premise data or virtual data is available in the public cloud. So we're supporting Amazon, we're supporting Azure, we're supporting GCP with the same level of capability we have for all of our other data sets. And we can do it across everything, because obviously most organizations these days have a hybrid infrastructure covering, often public and private cloud, as well as on-premise. So yes, we've got the full capability there.
Got it. Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our live Q&A. I think there's a couple questions still for you there, more technical questions maybe in the questions panel. But excellent presentation again, and thank you for being on.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of today's presentation.